This is the series, Not All Parents Are Good. In the previous episode, we analyzed the highly controversial case of Gypsy Rose. Today, in this new part, let's take a look at a demonic father, a case from Austria that shocked the world due to the disgusting and inhuman acts committed by the perpetrator. This is a case so revolting, just hearing about it might make you sick. A case where the victim endured unbelievable physical and mental torment. If it weren't such a well-known case, people might not even believe it was real. And when it went to trial, the public was horrified to learn how many times the criminal committed his acts. Over 3,000 times. Right now, let's dive into the case of Elisabeth Fritzl. Joseph Fritzl. The most accurate way to describe him is as a demon disguised as a man. His father was a Nazi soldier who died early during World War II. His mother raised him alone, as Koder was a Nazi soldier who died early during World War II. His mother raised him alone, as mother raised him alone. As he grew up, Joseph became a fairly successful electrical engineer. At the age of 21, he married Rosemarie and went on to have 7 children. But behind the facade of a successful man, Joseph was in fact an extremely dangerous sexual predator. In 1967, when Joseph was 35 years old, he broke into a woman's home and raped her while her husband was away, holding a knife to her neck to threaten her. That same year, he was also a suspect in the attempted rape of another 21-year-old woman. He was also arrested for flashing his genitals in public. Because of these crimes, he served 1 year in prison. However, Austria has a law that expunges criminal records after 15 years, so all of Joseph's crimes were later completely erased from his record. As time went by, Joseph grew older, but age did not bring maturity. In fact, the older he got, the more twisted his sexual desires became. And it was during this time that the crime which would later shock the entire world took place. Elisabeth Fritzl was Joseph's 4th child out of 7, and she was considered the prettiest among her sisters. In 1984, when Elisabeth turned 18, the most horrifying nightmare of her life began. On August 28th, Joseph asked his daughter Elisabeth to come down to the basement to help him install a door. After the installation was complete, he drugged her and imprisoned her behind that very door. The basement was like a high-security prison, secretly constructed over many years, since 1978. When Elisabeth was just 12 years old, Joseph had already begun building the hidden basement beneath the house. When going from the main house into the basement, all that could be seen was a small room. But beyond that door were 8 more doors, one of which was hidden behind a bookshelf. Leading to the detention area, the dungeon that held Elisabeth was a narrow, confined space with a sleeping area, kitchen, and toilet. There was no sunlight. It was completely soundproof and was sealed off from the outside world by 8 layers of doors, 3 of which were made of metal with electromagnetic locks. Joseph's electrical engineering skills were used for this very purpose. Elisabeth had 0 chance of escape or calling for help. So what exactly did this girl have to endure in that hellish prison? Elisabeth Fritzl was subjected to unspeakable acts by her own biological father, details too horrific to describe fully here. Instead, let's look at just a few numbers. 24 years, over 8,000 days, approximately 3 times a week, totaling more than 3,000 assaults. She gave birth 7 times, including 1 set of twins. 3 of the children lived with Elisabeth in the underground dungeon, while 3 others were taken upstairs and raised by Joseph as his own grandchildren. Joseph forced Elisabeth to write letters, claiming she had run away from home, given birth, and now wanted her parents to raise the children. He then secretly placed both the letter and the child at the doorstep of his house, pretending to find and adopt them as if they had been abandoned. The biggest mystery in this case is, how was he able to commit such horrifying acts for so many years without being discovered? Joseph lived with his wife directly above his imprisoned daughter, in a house located in a densely populated neighborhood. He even had a criminal record for rape, And yet when his daughter mysteriously disappeared and he would occasionally drop off babies at the house, none of the local social workers suspected a thing. Joseph had built an extremely fortified basement and manipulated his daughter through abuse and control, breaking her will to escape. As for the family living upstairs, they had no idea the basement even existed. All they ever saw was a small, ordinary room when going downstairs. Joseph went down there every day, claiming he was working or drafting blueprints for years, and no one in the household ever thought to check what he was really doing down there. Joseph made up lies about his daughter. He told everyone that Elizabeth had joined a cult and ran away from home. He even forced her to write letters with that same story, leading everyone to believe she had left to live on her own. His previous rape conviction had been wiped from his record after 15 years, so investigators found no red flags that might have raised suspicions. In my opinion, this was a serious failure on the part of local social services. The fact that children kept mysteriously appearing on the doorstep, supposedly from a woman who had been missing for years, should have raised alarm bells and prompted a proper investigation. They should have seriously looked into the whereabouts of the children's missing mother, instead of simply turning a blind eye and allowing Joseph to take custody of them. However, what was meant to happen eventually did, though it came a bit late for Elizabeth. It finally arrived on April 19, 2008. Elizabeth's eldest daughter, Kirsten, became gravely ill and lost consciousness. Elizabeth begged her father to take Kirsten to the hospital, and he agreed. Kirsten was suffering from severe pneumonia along with several other illnesses. The doctors grew suspicious, so they alerted the police. At that point, Joseph handed over another letter from Elizabeth, claiming that she was part of a religious cult, the same excuse he had used for years. However, this time it didn't work. The police reopened the case and broadcast the story on television in an effort to find Elizabeth, the missing mother of the child who was now critically ill in the hospital. 7 days later, Joseph made a decision. He actually released Elizabeth and her children from the cellar, brought them back to the house, and told the family that Elizabeth had left the cult and was now returning to live with them. Elizabeth went to the hospital to visit Kirsten, and right at that moment, the police arrived and arrested the girl who had been missing for 24 years, charging her with child abuse. However, that charge was just an excuse to interrogate the missing woman. The police had been suspicious ever since they saw the letter Joseph gave them, and they were unable to identify any cult that matched his description. They knew something was wrong with Elizabeth's situation. At first, the girl manipulated for 24 years was too traumatized to say anything. The trauma was overwhelming, but after some encouragement, she made the police promise that she would never have to see her father again. And only then did she agree to talk. The police made that promise. She spoke. And what followed was a global media firestorm. Joseph Fritzl confessed to all charges, including imprisonment, rape, abuse, and even murder. One of the children born in the cellar had died because he refused to take the baby to a doctor, and he burned the body to cover it up. Joseph was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2009. At that time, he was already 74 years old. For Elizabeth, the day she was taken into the cellar was her 18th birthday, and the day she walked out, she was already 42. Almost more than half of her life was gone. She and her children received both physical and psychological medical care, but it was extremely difficult for them to reintegrate into society. Their identities have been protected, and they were relocated to a remote village, isolated from the rest of the world, and have remained that way to this day. There have been many psychological analyses of Joseph Fritzl, and one of the key conclusions is that he lacked empathy and had no capacity for compassion, especially toward his own daughter. He exhibited a strong tendency to manipulate and control, engaging in deeply immoral acts solely to satisfy himself, particularly through distorted, deviant behaviors. One of his most serious psychological issues was paraphilic disorder. Joseph testified in court that he was trying to protect his daughter because she was too rebellious and difficult to discipline after reaching adulthood. However, These statements were deemed baseless and completely unacceptable. His actions were clearly driven by self-interest, causing severe harm to others. What's most disturbing is how inhuman and cruel his behavior was, sustained over such a long period of time, leaving people outraged and heartbroken. By the extent of his depravity, Joseph Fritzl was a true demon, and in my opinion, a life sentence was a fitting end for him. Elizabeth Fritzl, on the other hand, was not only a tragic victim, but also an incredibly admirable woman, a girl whose strength is almost beyond belief. There aren't many people who could endure such horrifying experiences, go through childbirth 7 times, and raise her children with nothing but the knowledge she had gained during her 18 short years above ground. She lived with a monstrous father, yet she did not become like him. She managed to preserve love in her heart, love for her children. She begged and pleaded to get her daughter medical treatment, and it was that motherly love that directly led to her rescue. Elizabeth escaped hell through the very love she never let go of. And there's one more thing about this case that keeps lingering in my mind, everyone. Joseph and Elizabeth. Don't you see the complete contrast between these two parents? Joseph was a parent as horrible as one could possibly be, but Elizabeth, on the other hand, was a mother who loved her children unconditionally, no matter the situation or the living conditions that were inhumane, yet she was still able to give birth, raise, and care for her children. Even mothers with everything provided might struggle to do what she did. Life truly was unfair to Elizabeth, but at the same time, strangely balanced. What do you think? Maybe life isn't all darkness after all. Even in such a horrifying case, there was still light.